What is up, guys, and welcome back to the Sweat It Out podcast. Today, we're very excited to have an amazing guest here in person, and you know how we love the in-person podcast. They're full of more energy, more excitement, more fun, and I always say just even more value. So today's special guest, he's an author of the Personal Wellness Principles, EQ life coach, history teacher, and we're going to talk about them fruit trees. Help us welcome the one and only John Bros. What is up, brother?
How we doing? Good to be here. Nice, easy drive down to Miami.
Let's go.
Life's good. Another beautiful day out here.
I love it, man. I love it. Well, tell us where you're from, because you drove down here.
Yeah, so I'm from the Treasure Coast, which is essentially a stretch of Vero to about Jupiter area. And the reason it's called the Treasure Coast is way back when the Spanish galleons, moving from the Caribbean, moving their gold back to Spain, sank right off our beaches here. And so there's these old Spanish galleons just littered off the beach, and every year people find gold and other stuff. So, yeah, that's why it's called the Treasure Coast.
Have you found any?
Yeah, I personally have not, but there are people every year that do. And in the summertime when it's calm and the water's really clear and clean, you can see the boats just off the shore still looking for them. So there's still actually a few of the ships that were never even found.
And we're getting the history lessons today.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. So yeah, from the Treasure Coast.
So Treasure Coast, and then history. So you're a history buff. Yep. What type of history you more or less you like? Because I like American history. That's what I prefer.
Yeah. I guess for me, I would say general history of the last few hundred years, really trying to gain a global perspective on it. Growing up, I loved learning about the world wars. And the older I've gotten, though, the more I've gotten into the little details and trying to learn about a lot of the things that aren't in the textbooks, such as the one that I use, with my students. So I spend a lot of time re-looking at a lot of the events that I learned about and, going to the library and just trying to relearn every other perspective of an event that I can. But I would say the last few hundred years, French Revolution onward.
What is something that you would say that a lot of people, if you told them right now that they don't know that it's out of the history books, that they would be in shock if you told them, hey, this was part of history, this is what happened? What's one thing that you can tell us? Probably
the unit I just finished up with my students, the colonization of Africa. I did not learn about it when I was in high school. When I was in college at UCF, I had a professor, Dr. Ezekiel Walker, and he grew up on a Nigerian cocoa farm and was one of a small handful of people that got a full ride scholarship to Michigan State, where he did bachelor's, graduate, master's, PhD, and he was my professor. So I had to take African studies with him, and I learned about this whole thing I had absolutely no idea about, and that's essentially that in 1884 at the Berlin Conference, a lot of the major players of Europe were all invited to Berlin, and Otto von Bismarck hosted them. And if you could imagine us at this kind of a table, but a giant map of the continent in the background, and everybody literally just carved up what they wanted, like 99% of the continent. Wow. And so, we hear about in the 60s, 70s, 80s, different African nations gaining their independence, and we never really stopped to pause and independence from who? And it ends up being France, Great Britain, Germany, Portugal. And so essentially you had this entire carving up of the continent, and by the early 1900s, the only two remaining places that were free within that continent that hadn't had any kind of European influence were Liberia and Ethiopia. And Liberia was only still open because it had been established as a freed place for slaves after slavery was made illegal, banished. And then Ethiopia, the Ethiopians were able to fight off the Italians. So by 1915, the only two places in that entire continent that hadn't been colonized were Liberia and modern Ethiopia. And that is just something that when I tell people,
it's wild.
Yeah, it's wild. And it's not that anyone purposely missed that lesson necessarily. It's in the textbook that I use with the kids. Same textbooks, Glencoe, McGraw-Hill, whatever, that we had. It just, my teacher when I was in high school just missed it, I guess. But that's something where it's a huge eye-opener. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Huge. Yeah. And they're talking about, right, in Africa specifically, that it's going to be what's going to take over China when it comes to industry, infrastructure. A lot of companies are looking to reallocate whatever they have in these other countries, and they're saying, hey, let's start going to Africa now. So I've been reading some studies that in the next 20 years, Africa is going to start blooming when it comes to industry because their population is growing so fast over there.
Yeah. And China has a lot of interest in there too. I mean, everybody does. It's the reason why it was carved up in 1884 is full of incredible resources. So yeah, that's an excellent point.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then you brought something on in here a little while ago, those fruits and all the stuff that you're talking about. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, we'll talk about that. So on top of teaching and publishing my book, I have a huge passion for fruit trees and edible landscaping. And so what my buddy David and I do is we go to a client's house and we'll tear out all the grass and then lay down all sorts of mulch and then create an edible permaculture system. So we'll have canopies of mangoes, and then you've got your avocados and lychees and star fruits and a number of other things that you never heard of that are super, super delicious. So yeah, today we brought you some star fruit fresh from the farm.
What's permaculture? I'm sorry, I first time I hear that.
Just to me, it's just the general premise of learning to grow plants and trees. You know, that's what I define it as. Someone might slam me on that, but that's what I think of it as. And the edible landscaping aspect is this idea that really the last 80 to 100 years were the first people in human history really that decided it would be smarter to grow grass in our yard than grow food. Like, we're the first people that have ever consciously decided, like, oh yeah, let's load it up with chemicals and fertilizers, and then those will go into the drain pipe and eventually get into our local water system. That'll be great. Versus just like, oh yeah, let's plant food because I have a family here and we can eat food off of our, like, it skipped at some point once suburbia began to become a thing in the early 20th century. And so we try to give people the encouragement to, you know, claim back some of that sovereignty where your food comes from, and also just recognize that even if you're sitting on a quarter acre or 10,000 square foot property, you can grow pounds and pounds and pounds of food. Yeah, it's a really, really interesting thing. So these were some star fruits, and then the real queen of them all here, this is a Java de Caba.
Oh, we tried one of those.
Also known as a Jabo. People pronounce them all sorts of ways, but I literally just seen my friend Maggie here before visiting you guys today and got myself a couple pounds. So yeah, we live in a special place here.
So John, what's because you know your history background, you know, we're talking about the fruits. What is the history behind these two fruits?
I'm not sure where the star fruit originally comes from, but regarding these two specific ones, these come from the farm up in Palm City. My buddy and his wife live on 5 acres, and our greenhouses and everything that we do for our grow is on that property. He probably has at this point, I want to say probably 100 different fruit trees planted.
Wow.
And then we've got hundreds more in the greenhouses. This is a really well-established tree. If you live in the state of Florida, you should be growing this. This grows very quickly, and once it starts producing fruit, it produces fruit, you know, maybe like 8-9 months out of the year, it seems like.
Wow.
And it's just over and over and over again. And again, if it's a matter of not only trying to claim back some of that health with where our food comes from, but also from a cost point of view, you know, right now at Publix, these are 2 for $5, and they're not, they're not picked fresh. They're picked from somewhere else, shipped, and they will get ripe, you know, on the stand, so to speak. But yeah, we have everything from these star fruit to, you know, jackfruit and lychees and longans and probably about 60 different varieties of mangoes. I mean, yeah, it's really neat.
So what are the benefits of the star fruit? And you know, you said something interesting. You know, it'll cost you 2 for $5 if you go to Publix. How much can it cost you to buy those seeds and plant them yourself?
So you could buy a tree right now, especially we're in Miami. You within a mile of here, you could find one of these that's already 3 foot tall, being sold for $35. Yeah, and then you put that in the ground, and next year it'll fruit. If it's not already. My buddies own a nursery in Loxahatchee. Shout out Incredible Edible Landscape. And they have trees that are in 7-gallon pots, again, maybe 4 foot tall, and they've already got fruit on them, already producing. So, I mean, it's a special thing. And these are super high in vitamin C. There's a couple phytonutritional aspects of it that I can't think of off the top of my head. I know for the people that are into various diets and such, this is a fan favorite because it's super low in carbohydrates. So I know there's people that really enjoy it for that reason. But yeah, prolific grower. If you're in Florida, you can grow this. I think Texas might be within that zone. I can't think off the top of my head.
So it's a Florida homegrown bound.
Yep. 2 hours north, picked fresh.
Love it. And a little bit about the other fruit again.
Yeah.
What's the name again?
So it's called Java de Caba.
Java de Caba.
And
Star Wars.
Yeah, for short, they're called Jabos. And yeah, really, really delicious. Very, very sought after. There's people that ship them stateswide, worldwide, because the interest of it has gotten so huge.
And how much are those again? I remember you told us a price.
So Fortunately, I know someone here locally that grows them, and this is just her passion. So she's very reasonable, but that sells at $20 a pound. But I know of people online through Etsy and other avenues like Instagram who are selling it for like $60 a pint.
So if somebody out there needs a little side hustle.
Yeah. But good luck finding them first, because the others want to have found them. Yeah, really good stuff. Also known as Brazilian grape. And the thing that's really cool about those is that they grow on the actual trunk of the tree as opposed to hanging down like just about everything else that we grow.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Well, do you know why that is?
I'm not so sure. It's just the aspect of that family of fruits.
I'm going to have to look that up.
Yeah, so like this is called Sabra. So these are Sabra variety. These take 8 to 10 years to fruit from seed. But then there's other varieties that have been found and selected. Like, for instance, there's red hybrid, there's scarlet, there's white, there's yellow, blue vexator. Some of those will take maybe like 4 years or 5 years to fruit. But these are just prolific. Wow. She'll get 40 pounds off of a single tree in a single harvest, of which there's multiple harvests a year. And then the seeds are incredibly, they can create incredible wealth too. There's people that'll sell 5 for $10.
So the Grape Family.
The common name is they call it the Brazilian grape, but it's not in the same family as like muscadines or the grapes that we think
can you make wine out of this or what?
Yes, people do make people make Java wine. Yeah. Now again, it's going to be someone that has a substantial amount of them for themselves because they're already so difficult to source just to enjoy, like we're enjoying them eating them. But yes, Java wine is supposed to be really good
and probably expensive.
Yeah. Someday we'll have enough between my buddy and I that we'll be able to make it.
Where can we get some right now? Java wine.
I don't know.
Oh man, we
probably Brazil,
eBay or something.
Probably Brazil.
I'm gonna get some Java wine after we get off of here.
I'm down.
That's the all about it. Do. What are the benefits of it?
Again, just packed with vitamins and minerals. It's dependent on each fruit. Some of them, help certain aspect with sight, and other things are helpful with blood pressure. We grow soursop and guanabana and a bunch of different things that have medicinal benefits. So I do lose track of each to the next. But really, ultimately, you're talking about just hydration, deliciousness, and on top of that, just getting all sorts of essential, phyto and micronutrition.
Love it.
Yeah.
John, you said something that was interesting.
Yeah.
Getting back food sovereignty and getting back our right to grow food and monitor and I guess control the process of how we're eating or what we're doing to control the food. How do you feel about the corporatization of farming and what they're doing with, Monsanto's? They have those one seeds that once they germinate and they produce the fruit or whatever, they die and then have to go back. Is this something that's avoidable? Because in the whole supply chain, they're eating these foods that are GMO? Is that what's called, GMO? Mm-hmm. And then the animals are eating it. Like, how do we avoid it? Even the products that we're using it, how do we actually know what we're getting into? Because sometimes, I'll talk to my girlfriend. She'll tell me, oh no, these, you got to read these items here because look what this has. I think it's olive oil, and this olive oil has 35 different ingredients.
Canola oil and polyunsaturated oils and such.
You see, those are things I don't know, but I look at it, I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna get a heart attack or something. So what do you feel about that? How can we prevent it?
So I personally, I loathe all of that situation that's going on. The corporatization of farming, the idea of people not having any control over their food source, over the quality of that food, whether it's veggies and fruits, whether it's meats. So really what it takes is a personal responsibility of each person to begin seeking that out at a local level. Again, we're blessed to live where we live down here, and you guys are true South Florida. I'm Southeast Florida. But we have people growing food. We might not know of them because they're not right off US 1, with a little tent set up that says fresh produce, but they're around. And so I think what people can begin doing is finding local markets, stop buying your produce from, whatever name brand grocery store from where you live, and try finding it from local people. And when you begin to do that, you begin to meet like-minded individuals who want to claim that sovereignty. And there might be someone right up the street who, again, is only on maybe an 8,000 square foot property, and they're producing 50 pounds of peppers out of their front yard from a 30-foot by 30-foot area. I know someone personally back home who does that. He just this month of February produced 50 pounds of peppers, tomatoes, and green beans from a space that is 1/4 of the room that we're in right now.
Wow.
Yeah. So you begin to just kind of put yourself out there to meet some of those people. You begin building those contacts, and then the hope is also that eventually the person gets inspired, the individual gets inspired, and if they have a little bit of space, you pick it up as a hobby. But I think that, we always talk about the pros and cons of social media and such. I know for me, the amount of connections I've made through that in this fruit world is insane in the last year. And from that and building relationships, I'm in a position now where I know a lot of different people growing a lot of different stuff, as do we. And you begin to share and you begin to trade, and it's a really special thing. It feels like you're tapping into something that you're supposed to be tapping into, but because of the hecticness of our day-to-day, we just don't get to feel that very often. And then, on top of that, the meat, that's a really important thing, is that we have been conditioned to not really know what a high-quality meat is like. I was telling Anthony earlier, my family and I last year, we ordered a half a cow, like a finished cow, from Pasture Prime up in Ocala. Shout out Torn. And that cow completely finished. So you have all your New York strips, you have all the Delmonico's, everything's separately packaged. You got like 75 individual 1.5 pound things of ground beef, and you just put that into a freezer chest, you're never going to the store again for that whole year to buy any kind of meat. And when you look at it, you're looking at a color that is nothing like anything you've bought before at Publix. Sorry.
What's the
at
color?
any of the grocery
This is the
stores.
meat man. This is a barbecuer. He's a barbecuer.
Dude, I am too. I love it. I cook steaks almost every night, but it's sourcing them and finding really high quality meat.
Well, he's saying meat man because I actually was a butcher when I was 18.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So I to make some extra money, I worked for a place there, and I was actually butchering the meat and all the cuts and all that. And I know what you mean. Learned a lot about all those, the Delmonico's, the New York strips, all that. The color of the meat, you are right, it is different because it's not supposed to get bright red like that. And talk about that as to why that happens, because I'm not that familiar with it. I would just see it change.
Yeah, as far as I know, that there's, and this is depending on which place it's getting processed, but there's a lot of the meat processing places that add like a gas. They add gas to the actual pack before they seal the plastic over, because it keeps that red-pink color. The truth is that it's not that it's necessarily gone bad, but it's being held onto by extra little forces there that were essentially a chemistry little set as opposed to true meat. And so, yeah, as far as I know, it's some kind of a gas that's added, and it's like, why is there gas being added to my flank steak? That's just an unnerving thing to even think about. Versus you go to a cattle rancher and you see what they have to offer, and you're like, that is literally 30 shades of red, maroon, darker than anything I've ever seen at the store, let alone the fact that it's not getting gassed or whatever it is that they do with it.
Yeah, I think it's like, I don't know. I'm not even going to say what the gas is. Maybe like a nitrogen or, I don't know. Starts with an N.
Something like that.
Something like that. And it's so important to source the meat. I mean, I don't know here in Miami, to be honest with you, I haven't looked where to find that. How much does getting like a whole cow cost, like roughly?
So a whole cow, we had done a half cow, and I think that ended up being finished around like $2,200, something like that. Okay. Maybe a little bit more. But finished product, that was like 280 pounds of meat, if I remember correctly. It was, or 240 maybe. It was a lot. How much profit can you make
off of that if you sold it?
Oh, I'm sure it would be
double.
Yeah,
sure.
Easily.
Triple.
Easily. I mean, overall, by the end of the year, if you were to eat that same amount of meat at the store and not the grass-fed stuff, you're saving insane amount of money. It's a lot of money up front for that initial purchase, but that's the idea. If you got a buddy or two or a family member locally that's down to get it on it with you, you're set.
Yeah.
You're set.
Well, the meat industry is very lucrative because they make a lot of money on the cuts. If you buy it whole like how you're buying it, and then you create your own cuts and you do your own thing, it's a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
But you'll get a little steak that has 3 little thin sliced steaks, and they're like $15 at Publix, and you're like, what is it?
Wagyu steak.
Yeah, but those ones at Publix aren't even. That's just regular.
That's like, I don't even know what grade that is. That's like a grade something. And you sparked something in my mind right now about food standards, and I guess like EU and the European Union. Like, I just had a thought right now. I see from what I've read before that their standards, I guess, with food is a lot higher, I guess, than the United States, because I didn't know this. I was reading an article that they were saying like deli meat, it's considered like a carcinogenic. Yeah, in Europe, like the certain way they cut the meat and the way it's processed. I don't know why here they have that. Do they have that standard, or why is there such a discrepancy?
Yeah, so to answer why, I can't say for sure, but
Money,
I can.
Right?
And
I figured.
And when you make people, when people aren't digesting the best for their bodies, they don't always end up feeling the best. And when you don't feel your best, you think you're sick, and then you're on supplements or you're on whatever it might be. So
medication.
It's a money thing. To me, it's always a money thing. And a great example of what you're talking about is taking basic sweets, right? So in Europe, they've got those awesome like biscotti type of shortbread cookies, and they got all that kind of deliciousness. They use palm oil in almost all of those snacks. Maybe there's local bakeries that still use olive oil and stuff like that, or just butter, and they don't use any oil. But for those snacks that you could find at the local grocery store but are made from overseas, they use palm oil. In this country, that same snack would be using canola oil or a variety of sunflower, safflower, soybean, just wickedness, just the worst. And so, I don't know who's in a position to be able to, year after year, sneak more of that into our food, along with the fact that no one holds them accountable. Like, hey, switch your oil. Better yet, use butter.
Yeah.
But if you're not going to use butter, certainly don't be using canola. I mean, it's literal poison, and it's in almost all of our stuff. And so the question as to why the EU would handle that differently than here in the States, I don't want to turn off any listener with where my mind might go with that question overall. But really, big picture, to me, it's just a matter of no matter what the reason is, right? If we're not going to relocate and go move to Europe and trust that people are looking out for us, then we got to take responsibility and go, okay, I need to learn how to read a nutritional label. Not fats and proteins and macros, but what is this word I can't pronounce? What is canola oil? How long has that been used? How long have all of the issues that we have with long-term health been around that are synonymous with the rise in these things being in our, being placed in our food? So I think it's really important for each individual to understand, just pick up the average label at the store, and really look at the amount of different ingredients that are in there that we can't pronounce, let alone spell.
Say, the more, the worse.
Yeah, the more, the worse, 100%. I go in there, I'm like, how much of this was on the shelf for my great-grandpa however long ago? None of it, 90% of it. And 90% of it, oddly enough, can survive on that shelf for a long, long time. So if I know that if I were to go pick these fruits, and they don't last a long, long time, or if I was to go to the butcher and get fresh meat, that has a certain shelf life, very quickly you just realize we've been hoodwinked. And, there's no finger to point except for once we realize that we've been hoodwinked and we don't do something about it.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't know the exact whys, but I just know that there is a very real theme there. And that theme is that here in the States, we expect people who are in a position of importance or a position of direction or power to look out for us, to make the best decision possible for us. And that is a fantasy. No. That is a fiction novel at a child's reading at the local library.
And
it's just
see
not
it with
real.
everything. You see it with everything, with the fact of, always avoiding the top, even, with the whole, the pandemic, nobody talks about health and fitness. Nobody talks about eating better, getting more sleep, going outside and move your body. Yep. Avoid this. This is what's going to be healthiest for you in the sense of natural substances that are actually good for you, going out and getting sun, doing all this stuff.
It took them 2.5 years. It took them 2.5 years to say, hey, by the way, it seems to be that people who exercise more, this doesn't affect them as badly. Anyways,
yep.
And nobody remembers that. But you're right. You wonder why.
And it goes
people
with
aren't
everything.
Looking out for you.
It goes with everything. So what do we do here in the sense of obviously I always say, you can't control the uncontrollable, so control what you can control, and that's yourself. Mm-hmm. So for people who want to start, and I want to say we'll start with the gardening first, right? Especially in big cities, when we'll use Miami, who's constantly growing. You're seeing more and more people living in high rises, right? So that's just going to keep growing up. How can somebody start building a small, self-sustainable, we'll call it micro farm, in their apartment?
Yeah. So I know that there's a lot of new technologies that are coming out with different vertical grows that can even be done inside because they have 360-degree lighting and things like that. But I can't speak too well to that. What I can say is that for the people that do have some space on a porch, again, realize that it's not as intimidating as it seems, and dial into some of the awesome resources we have. All of us can be kinesthetic learners in 2022 because we have YouTube. Yep. There's plenty of aspects.
YouTube Academy.
I mean, there are innumerable opportunities to learn to do anything you want. But even if you don't want to learn how to, grow some green onion and some basil because you don't have a green thumb or it's not a natural passion, I think people need to trust themselves that, like I said earlier, somewhere deep inside, you have a connection to the earth in that capacity. Because we're the only group of people that don't grow our own food to some capacity. And so I think if people can first buy into that and go, okay, I know that when I finish working out, I feel good. I know that physiologically upstairs after I finish my run, I feel great. I feel better than I did. I think a garden is the same thing. I think that when people work with the dirt in some capacity, even if it's a small garden box on your back porch or your high rise, it offers people a certain level of responsibility, a certain level of diligence, a certain level of dedication, and a serious level of responsibility. That being said, it's not that imposing. It's not that intimidating. And so what I think people should do is, depending on where you live, right, look to see first what kind of herbs you can grow. And along with that theme of taking back your sovereignty of your food, we have a huge, we're very drawn to order out, very, very often. And the hope is that people begin to cook more for themselves and realize, again, how capable you can be to make something super delicious. And so what's a good place with that is, as opposed to the difficulty of maybe tomatoes or cucumbers, start growing some green onion, start growing some basil. Depending on the season, start putting in some cilantro and some lemongrass and rosemary, and be able to go outside on your porch, and whether you're making eggs or steak or salad, have fresh herbs. Once someone does that, in my opinion, they're hooked.
Yeah.
Maybe not to the degree of my buddy and I, or a lot of my friends where this is their life, but to a degree where you go like, oh yeah, this makes sense. So I think people should start with something easy. Start with order some seeds online from a reputable dealer, or go get some soil from a local nursery, and play with it a bit and just try. And I promise, I think that there's something that just clicks, where when someone sees in that pot a little, green nodes start to pop, you're like, oh, I did that. It's almost like being a kid in science class and there's a neat little activity you get to do and you get to see the before and after. Well, that same capacity of excitement is in all of us as adults too. It's just we're so bogged down with traffic and getting from one place to the next and all these other things that we miss out on some of that childlike excitement.
Yeah.
And so, whether you're 12 or you're 20 or you're 40, if you planted a seed and you got it to sprout and you see that, you're hooked. So I would say people should start there.
Start with what you have, because what you have is plenty. And another thing is where, and man, you're gonna even start getting me to start growing stuff.
Awesome.
But just thinking overall with what you're seeing, with society's going, our world, our life, getting some of that control of controlling what you put back in your mouth is super important, especially when you see, and I'll throw an example, like, Bill Gates owns most of the agricultural property in the United States.
Yeah, more farmland than any other single entity.
And you see what they're doing there.
Yeah.
You're seeing what they're doing there. It ain't healthy.
No.
It ain't good. So would you say that this would be a big front runner, one of the big front running ways to combat what's going on with that?
Yeah, you can completely combat it. You can have 5 friends, and again, it doesn't take a farm, it doesn't take 10 acres. If you have a yard, you can have 5 friends and literally, based off of simple coordination, grow enough food where you're not buying produce again. Literally. Is there a learning curve? Of course, like anything. But you learn it, you figure it out, and you have now got organic produce that tastes better than anything you've ever bought at the store, and you have removed yourself from that insanity of where it's going, where, again, the quality of what we're eating just is not what it's supposed to be. So, yeah, I think that there's a way to avoid that commercial farming. I think there's a way to avoid that really low quality, low nutrition value produce, and it comes back to that at-home production. And again, I know for some people it might sound like kind of extreme, or it might come off as intimidating, like this is a big task. And it's not that difficult. It's not that difficult. I believe that it was intended to be made easy. On my Instagram the other day, I was in our greenhouse, and I'd bought a strawberry plant at a Palm Beach fruit and plant show like a year ago. Completely forgot about it, got neglected, just in a regular 1-gallon pot. I went back there a few months ago, and it had propagated itself like 90 times over. Wow. And not into the ground, into a black tarmac that we use, like a weeding mat, in the greenhouse. So this thing was just rooting into the weed mat, and I went back there yesterday, and it's producing flowers, and there's strawberries on it.
That is insane.
And I haven't done a single ounce of work on it, and it's literally just rooted into a plastic mat. So I look at that, and I'm like, this should be motivation for anybody to recognize, like, it doesn't have to be that difficult.
No, and it shouldn't be difficult. And it's sad that it's when people talk about it, it's like kind of like a lost art. Because if anyone brings it up, they're like, oh, I farm, I have my own nursery. Everyone kind of looks at you like, wow, you still do that. Okay, that's interesting. And it's sad because if you look at history back in the 1930s, 1940s, I think 80% of the population, they lived rural, they were growing their own food, doing all that. And then after, the 1950s, 60s, you start seeing the transition to now. Today I was looking at a stat, and I don't know if I'm right or wrong.
It's like less than 1%, right?
Less than 1%. So 1% of our food supply is being done by the very small few people. And I get frustrated because I'm very big on education financially. I'm very big on this education because you're in school. I don't even know how to grow my own food. I don't even know how to do my own taxes. And then when you come out here, it's like they're making profit off your ignorance.
Yeah.
Which is the sad part. And I don't, in my way of seeing things, I think that us speaking about this in an open format, it brings a light and sheds light onto these things. I would never have even known about those grapes had you have not told me.
Right. Yeah. I think that's really well said. And, I think that, again, people just kind of forget where we come from, and the idea of a fellow owning a nursery and somebody like, wow, I still do that, still's going on. It's like, oh yeah, it will always go on. It will always be necessary. The difference is that, like you said, 50, 60 years ago, it was just so much more prevalent. And now it's kind of a scary thing how certain we are that, I'm headed to the grocery store to go get our list for the week. It's like, okay, but what if you went one day and didn't have what you needed? Like what would you do? Who do you know? What kind of resourcefulness do you have? And not a lot of people these days are resourceful in that kind of old school way. And it's not a machismo thing or anything like that. It's just a matter of, wow, we've kind of gotten away from the basics. And when I say basics, I'm talking about basics for every other person who's ever existed on the planet, right? Like, this isn't like, oh yeah, this is the 90s compared to the 60s. It's like, no, this is like the last 100 years compared to millennia.
Yeah.
And we're doing things much different.
Yeah.
Not that things shouldn't be done different, and then there's growth and there's development, but we get away from it. And, I think that it really comes down to a person going, I want to make a difference with this part of my life. And even if I don't know anybody at the moment, I do have tools to find that person. And whether that's Craigslist, whether that's Instagram, whether that's a local fruit sale, a local, and up in Treasure Coast, I'll constantly see at this time of the year, like people with roadside truck selling fresh coconuts, selling fresh mango. Stop by, meet those people, buy some stuff, talk to them. And I think in doing so, you can really begin to build a network where you can claim that sovereignty. You don't have the time to start the garden. I get it. It's not for everybody. But the ability to still find some local stuff is something that everybody can do. Yeah. Somebody within 2 miles of here has hens who are laying eggs and they're selling eggs.
Yeah,
for sure.
Agree. And me and Anthony talk about it. If there's an apocalypse here,
I was supposed to bring that up right now.
If there's an apocalypse where we see we're on the same wavelength, if there's an apocalypse here, we're all screwed because I don't know how to grow anything.
Yeah. And you want the resourceful people in your circle.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I'll be calling you, man. And this is the crazy part. So even with the pandemic, I think this opened a lot of people's eyes. I know it opened my eyes into how important we have a lot of food insecurity in this country. And there are people that don't eat, and we make so much food and we dump it all out.
Yeah.
And then in the pandemic, that's one thing to even talk about, which I want to hear your opinion on that, because I know in Europe they're doing some interesting things with that. But going back to the pandemic, I remember walking into grocery stores, meat was empty. I couldn't find fruits. So what do we do in a situation, God forbid, we go into a war or anything like that? I don't know how people are going to survive. It would be a very, very difficult time.
Yeah, what would people's victory garden look like in 2022?
And here's the other thing,
right?
too. We talk about this all the time.
Yeah.
Hey, all it takes is an EMP strike, and you're wiped out of all your electronics. So now what? Now what?
I tell my students that at school, and they look at me like I'm nuts. I'm like, be surprised.
That's the one thing we tell everybody. Nobody wants to, this defense, EMP strike, you're done.
Whatever it might be.
Anything, camera, this, phone, done.
I think you're going to see a return to some of that idea of resourcefulness, and people just kind of, like you mentioned for yourself, just kind of looking around one day and going, all right, this is different from when I was a kid. A lot of these basic things appear different, seem different, act differently. So how am I going to position myself to possibly be able to account for that if things did go wrong? I think they say we're always 6 days away. The grocery store is 6 days away from people just going insane. Like if the grocery was out for 6 days, that's all the last canned food insanity. So, some of the friends that I've made this last year, there's none of that kind of worry. Even for what we've got at the farm, there's none of that worry. There's hens, there's 200 different varieties of fruit trees. You establish connections, like I said, with your local ranchers and things of that nature. And here in the city in Miami, like that might not be around, but out in Plantation or out in Homestead or out, further northwest, there's going to definitely be cattle farmers, for sure in Ocala, for sure in Ocoee. And so I think that it is something to be weary of. I always tread lightly because I don't know who I'm talking to initially regarding this type of stuff. But yeah, I believe that it's each individual person's responsibility to start really honing in on some of those skills. Yeah. If for anything other than you get to be a bit old school, you get to tap into some of that part of you that's human and not this part that so often it's my job, traffic, my job. Like tapping into that, people wonder, oh, I'm so depressed and I don't feel, where's the meaning of life? It all seems so, what do you think? If we're stuck doing things that don't feel so human all the time and we don't make the time to tap into that humanity, that is going to make a lot of people feel, less value, less purpose. And what you mentioned about the issue with throwing so much food out and so many people not eating, that is a whole other story. The average person would say, oh, well, in a small town, you don't want fruit hanging over the roads because it'll stain the road. And it's like, okay, but you already have a bunch of other things, acorns and whatever else that stain the road, flowers that stain the road. There should be fruit trees. We live in Florida. Yeah. Again, when I'm coming off the highway here, it was beautiful. All the mango trees in bloom. Here in 2 months, it's going to be Mango City all over this state. It's just going to be mango bonanza. Actually, some of my buddies have a mango tasting thing they do in Loxahatchee. They call it Mango Palooza.
Ooh, we're gonna have
and
to
last
go.
summer, they had like 80 different varieties of mangoes.
Mango, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't even know there was that many.
There's over 200.
Varieties?
Yes.
Different, wow.
Yeah. So, I always say if I was king, the streets would not have any of those worthless vegetative plants. They'd be filled with natives, and I'm not saying everything has to produce a fruit, but why don't homeless people have an area to eat? Why isn't there some kind of an instructional thing where you could actually plan out seasons for people who are struggling to that degree and they need an extra bit of help? Why not? And up where I'm at and down here, we have in the Annona family something called pond apples. They're also known as alligator apples, and they're often, you'll see them in the mangroves. Now, within that family of Annonas, there's a bunch of others, the guanabana soursop, which I know you've probably seen down here before. So that's Annona muricata, and the pond apple is Annona montana, I think, so I might be wrong. Either way, when I'm sitting at a stoplight, I see these just because I've gotten into it and I can recognize them. They're everywhere. They produce fruit. Now, the pond apple isn't as good as the sugar apple, but it's calories, it's nutrition. So on the same exact corner, you've got someone who's homeless, who is struggling severely, who needs calories more than anything, calories and shelter. Well, there's calories sitting right here, but they don't even know how to recognize it. Yeah. So I think there could be a really awesome effort to help those people be able to recognize edibles. Half the hedges in a lot of the plazas that we'll park in are edible. They produce various types of fruit at different times of the year. And, again, I think about calories and energy. It's just kind of crazy that we don't have something like that set up.
I'm going to say, get the free crack pipes out, put these fruits in place. And that's what these homeless people
and
need.
It's biodegradable too. So I don't know what the big deal is if it hits the floor. It's not like you're throwing trash in.
So so then let's zoom out and think, well, what if you really could establish this in a whole county and there's just thousands of trees? Slowly and surely, someone's going to not be going to buy their apples that are coming from Vermont or their Chiquita bananas that are coming from Central America because they go, oh, there's 100 different varieties of bananas I can grow here in Florida. Oh, there's blue Java ice cream banana. That exists. That's a thing. Well, I want that. Why do I want what's at the store? So very quickly, with what we're talking about here, if you were to use county funds or a certain amount of money to invest in your community and do that, people might catch on.
Bryan, how would that work?
That would have to be...
You're the guy.
That would have to be a lot of lobbying, man. You have to get the community involved to get votes. There's a place that Miami-Dade County has that's called the Fruit and Spice Park. Which I'm sure you've been there. A lot of people who haven't seen it, they should go if you live in Miami, especially because there's a lot of different varieties of fruit, and it's a great way to introduce the mass of the population to, hey, what could grow here?
Yes.
I didn't know dragon fruit even grew here.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that until I went there. And I was like, okay.
And they're cactus, which we also generally don't think of.
Well, you taught me something new. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Cactuses grow here too.
Oh yeah, tons of cacti. We have something called Peruvian pear cactus, but mostly the dragon fruit. Yeah, so the dragon fruit are cacti, and they'll produce often down here.
Wow.
Yeah. Now some of those can flower and fruit on their own. Others require cross-pollination, but there's many dragon fruit varieties now that are self-pollinating. So the cool thing about that is we have a ton of dragon fruit at the farm. I could take a fresh cutting this big for you, leave it out and let it dry, then plant that cutting 2 weeks later, and it'll develop roots, and then you have a brand new plant from our mother tree.
Wow.
Just that easy. Wow. Just that easy.
Wow, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty dope.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that we grow, we have something called a strawberry tree, strawberry fruit tree, but it's also known as a Jamaican cherry. It's in the Munsingia family. And take cuttings, stick it in dirt, roots.
Done.
Mulberries, take a cutting, stick it in dirt, roots. That's when I talk about it can be a lot easier than you might think.
So what would you say, let's say with 5, what are 5 trees or fruits that you would say any beginner should start with?
For sure. Again, speaking for Florida, but I would say the star fruit, carambola, undoubtedly, just because it produces so much. I would say mulberries, because they fruit very quickly and they fruit prolifically.
Okay.
Mulberries. This next one is really special, the Barbados cherry, also known as the Acerola cherry, Acerola. That has more vitamin C content than any other thing on this planet.
More than oranges?
Get this.
Interesting.
Smaller than, let's just say the Barbados cherries at the farm are about this big. This single cherry, more vitamin C than if you ate 8 entire oranges.
Why is that?
It's just its makeup. When they started doing supplements in the late 80s and supplements became a thing, what they decided to mimic vitamin C after synthetically was the acerola cherry. So in one single cherry, not only do you have all of your vitamin C for the day, but it's 8 to 10 times as potent as those oranges.
So when they make supplements, they're grounding that up to make the supplement?
You can get acerola powder. Yes. Yeah, acerola cherry powder is something that you'd see in every single health food store. But then like in a random vitamin C, synthetic vitamin C supplement though, what they're doing is they're synthetically, I guess, mimicking the structure of that. Yeah. But one single cherry that big, all your vitamin C content for the entire day.
Does the powder lose
potency?
Yeah, I mean, it's never as good as it's being fresh. Yeah. But I mean, they planted that tree probably 5-6 years ago, and it's bigger than the table. Nice shape to it. And again, when you look at that food like medicine, and you walk outside and you just pluck one, vitamin C for the day, done.
Jeez.
Yeah. And you talk about a family and arming your family with a great health.
And that's why I tell people, I'm like, man, you don't need all these supplements.
No. Eat your supplements.
Here.
Yeah, I mean, people don't know. People often, again, the vitamin C, the first thing we think about is an orange. Peppers. A red bell pepper has all the vitamin C you need in a single red bell pepper. So let's say you don't have access to Barbados cherry. All right, eat a bell pepper. Well, I don't like bell pepper. All right, well, cut it up, chop it up, saute it, and throw it in your scrambled egg. You know what I'm saying? Like, find a way to eat your vitamins and minerals. And then once you master that, then you can start getting into like prebiotic foods and probiotic foods and all that extra layer. But yeah, so I would say Barbados cherry, carambola starfruit, mulberries. That would be a top 3 for me. Yeah, for anybody to just start.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. I'm gonna definitely consider building that. I live in a 2-2 apartment, but I got a balcony. So
there's a guy on the West Coast in California. I think he's called like SoCal balcony grower or something like that. He has like he probably has like 30 trees and it's all green just hanging off of the back porch. And he has things that are fruiting from pots on that back porch. Super cool. Yeah, super cool.
All right, I need to get that name after when the podcast. I want to follow that guy.
Yeah, for sure.
How did we've been in this conversation, but I don't think we've asked you this one. What got you into this passion of fruits and cultivating and basically understanding
and
this?
Is this all too? Because I want to dive in, and I don't mean to cut you off. I want to tie it in with. Is this something you incorporate with your coaching? Because I want to definitely go and talk a little bit about your coaching after as well.
It is. It's something that I believe, again, is just like that exercise, something that should be done just to help your brain get into that higher frame of mind. So that is for sure. How I got into it is fairly interesting. In the summer of 2019, I was finishing writing my book up in Michigan. And so again, I'm a school teacher.
Bring that book out. Bring the book out. You dropped the book. Bring it out. So
we got the personal wellness principles, simple steps to create a happy, healthy, and fulfilling life. Essentially an A to Z guide for anybody who's just trying to get into a space where they can increase their quality of life. Short chapters, examples for everything, homework to give the reader, and quotes to wrap it all up for each different subject area. So I was up in Michigan finishing writing the book, and I have a friend up there who's a medical caregiver, and he also grows CBD. And I had seen in a handful of areas that there is incredible nutrition in the cannabis leaves, phytonutrition, micronutrition. And so I had an interest in juicing this, creating juice shots for people, completely non-psychoactive, not about getting high or anything like that, just looking at it from a medicinal point of view that most people aren't tapping into. But there's a couple doctors who have. So my intent that summer was to finish writing the book and to work for him and learn from him a little bit and try to start getting like a juice recipe together. Okay, so that's what I spent like that summer doing. Wow. When I came back to start the next school year, my plan was to leave maybe like halfway through, move up there and try my shot at this. Well, before that could happen, my mom, who's also a public school educator, she overheard a colleague of her talking about getting a hemp license through the new Florida hemp pilot program. And hemp is CBD and vice versa. And so my mom asked me, she's like, do you want me to talk to this guy for you and see if you guys should meet? And I was like, yeah, that's definitely pretty neat. Like, this is brand new to the state of Florida back in 2020. And it was just a very unique opportunity. I thought, there's another teacher in this town and he has some area of interest in this. Like, this seems cool. So he and I met, and that ended up becoming my partner who I do all this fruit with. But the initial capacity of what we did together was we grew and still grow hemp CBD. And so we act as a nursery for farmers in the state who want to grow for flower to make into CBD oils and CBD balms and such. We ourselves do not allow our stuff to go into flower. We are strictly in vegetative so that we can sell people clones, baby little plants, instead of here's a seed, here's a seed, here's a seed. So that was our business. And unfortunately, when COVID hit, the demand for what we had kind of planned for and expected just across the whole state just really went down tremendously. And also, I think the allure of Florida homegrown CBD just didn't really stick, because you already have places like Tennessee and Kentucky and Michigan and Oregon who've been doing it for a long time. And if you have a business down here in Florida and you want to get into CBD, you're not going to pay the extra buck because it's Florida. You're going to buy wholesale from people who've been doing it for a decade, which is what happened. So here we were kind of stuck with all this infrastructure and all these plants, and we were just doing tons of work and making no money. And so somewhere around then, COVID happened. Schools closed during spring break, and we got sent home for the rest of the year, and we're both teachers. Around that time, I saw a video about fruit forests and building out a fruit forest in people's yards, ripping out that grass, putting in that stuff. And so I started buying a couple random trees. He had already had a handful of mature trees planted in the yard years earlier, but didn't really have this passion. And before we could blink, we were both just buying everything you could ever imagine and more. And very quickly, we ended up with this massive collection of trees. And then certain things would start fruiting, and we'd start planting them, and then we'd have seedlings. And then we were like, all right, we're good at this. We have a passion for this. We already have the infrastructure for this from the hemp. So why don't we start trying to advertise what we can? And from there, we've started selling trees and started. We've had 5 or 6 different jobs now where we did those edible landscaping installs, tearing out the grass, creating something, and where right away people can begin to enjoy the benefit of that yard as opposed to paying for fertilizers and paying for chemicals for grass.
Can I give you an idea? I'm sorry, because the way you explain it, for a guy like me who really is not that familiar with this, you explain it so well.
Oh, thank you.
Which I know that you're a master of your craft. Very digestible.
Yeah.
It's the teacher in me.
That's it.
Yeah, man. You're killing it. Do you have a YouTube channel? You should be recording you guys building this out.
Do you have a course, man?
I don't.
They're
all things that are on the list.
Take a video camera. Do me a favor.
Yeah.
Take a video camera and just record you and your partner, because you do this for private people that you build these forests.
Mm-hmm.
Do that. Let them record you. I promise you, you will have over 1 million subscribers.
Easy.
Oh, yeah.
Because that is so fascinating. Because in my mind, I'm thinking about you and your partner doing this. And I'm like, man, how does this come together? And how does the end product look?
Mm-hmm.
I would watch it all day.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. It is something that we should do. There is somebody here in the state of Florida, basically the guy that a lot of us learn from. He's out on the west coast of Florida. He does that. And so he does, he's got his drones and all that kind of stuff, and he shows the before and after, the process, and it is really neat. And I think once I'm in the capacity to put more time and energy into it, it is something that I want to do.
That's really cool.
That would be
man.
really cool.
No, I'm telling you right now, with what you just shared, it's so simple that the way you explain was so simple that anybody listening is going to be like, wow, I can do something like this.
Yeah.
I can use something like this. On their end, like, have you seen people say, wow, I've drastically also saved money from doing this? And also on your end, how profitable is a business like this? If somebody also wanted to start their own business and do this, how profitable is a business?
It can be a very profitable business. I think only because there's so few people who are tapping into that demand right now. And I still think there's so many regular everyday civilians that don't recognize the need for it, but slowly and surely they will. But people save a tremendous amount of money because, we're installing fruit trees and we're consciously creating these little systems, but it's not just picking fruit off the tree. We have ground floor cover where it's sweet potatoes or it's spinaches, where very quickly, maybe the tree takes a year or two to fruit, but immediately our client is no longer going to the store to buy lettuce. They're never buying spinach again because we planted a single longevity spinach or an Okinawa spinach cutting. And these things, I could plant 3 right here on this table, and in a month and a half we come back and the entire table is covered.
Wow.
It just does work. And so they save tremendous amounts of money, and it's tremendous amounts of time too. I think a lot less people care about the idea of necessarily going to Publix and dropping $9 in the produce stand. It's
over
their
an
time.
hour.
Yeah, man. And so to be able to walk out your back door and pluck a bunch of different fresh greens, grab your star fruit. One of my friends that we did an install for, she texted me the other day and was telling me how much she was enjoying it. Longevity spinach, Okinawa spinach, and a handful of other perennial lettuces that we had planted that grow like trees. And she took all those, made a fresh salad, took the star fruit, diced that up, and then she has something called Everglades tomatoes, which grow like a weed down here. Threw those in completely from her yard.
And no preservatives on it.
Nothing.
That's the beautiful
No sprays, no chemicals, no nonsense.
So when's the last time John stepped into a Publix?
Oh, I'm not going to front like that. It's still pretty obvious. It's still pretty obvious.
He's just not going through the produce section.
Yeah. I would say, because I ran out of my cow. I'm at the I've got like 3 cuts left of my cow that I'd split that I mentioned. So what I end up doing is I'll go back there and this is actually the best deal at Publix. So don't everybody go running out there and ruin my supply chain. So $7, I think like $7.60, something like that, for a 5-ounce grass-fed filet. And so, if you can learn how to cook a stovetop steak, you're set. So that is the premier reason why I go into Publix still, is to go in there and just I grab one of those and I leave.
You're done.
Yeah,
That's it.
That's it. Yeah,
So
but
Publix
produce-wise,
Publix
nothing.
is still serving one purpose.
Yeah, they still help me there.
So John, how is it that we mentioned also as well, utilizing this with their coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us a little bit about your coaching. How you got into the space, and then how is it that you use, what we talked about with other tactics as well to help somebody, just live a more healthy wellness lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's just gonna be a better individual.
Certainly. So, before I even knew I wanted to write the book, I was in a position where I was having a tough time, like early on in the summer, and I went to Morocco. I used to do a lot of backpacking. I lived in Thailand for a bit teaching English, so I used to travel a lot. So I went to Morocco to do a little backpacking and a little soul searching. Brought some books, brought some notebooks, and had an emergency. I had to leave the country early. I had a family that was sick in Michigan. I had to get to Michigan. And long story short, at some point in that trip, I was like, all right, maybe some kind of professional speaking, something like that. Because my students, again, I teach 10th grade world history. So, my students don't remember my class for Napoleon invading Russia in the cold. They remember my class for the lessons that we talk about regarding personal development, regarding holding yourself accountable, self-awareness. And so I wanted to figure out how I could take that, which I knew had a hugely positive effect, and just maximize it to a larger audience. And so I'm like, all right, maybe speaking. And fast forward, I'm on the last flight of that day to get out of Morocco and get to Michigan. And I'm sitting right next to this guy very, he was well dressed, and I just happened to ask him, "What do you do?" He's like, "Oh, I'm a motivational speaker." I'm like, "Oh, you don't say." Like, so here I am in this kind of personal tragedy that I'm dealing with family health and other stuff. And I'm very stressed. And this guy just reaffirmed something that had just popped into my mind a couple of days earlier. And so I sit there and chat with him, and he asked me, "Well, what do you want to, speak about?" And I said, "Well, wellness and really trying to improve quality of life." So he was like, "You need to write a book." So then that's what triggered the writing of the book. Once the book was published, I had heard about life coaching, and somebody had compared some of the stuff that I do in my classroom with my students to the same kind of exercises you would learn from a coach. And so I gained a lot of interest in that, and I ended up hiring my own coach. And what happened was, very quickly I realized, especially with the curriculum regarding cognitive distortions and modes of distorted thinking, it was like something clicked. And I just could not believe that here were these different terms to articulate things that we do upstairs, and we just will pawn it off to, "Oh, well, that's just how I am," or "That's just how I've always been." That's just how I've always been. And it's like, no, this is, according to this branch of curriculum, there's a label to this, there's a name for this, there's something that you can become aware of and start working on. And so I just got incredibly passionate with that. And this last year I launched the coaching business, and it's going well. And I think it's really important for people to recognize that, with something like purpose, like I've got a handful of things that I have going right now purpose-wise. For some people, it's not always like right in front of them like that. And I think what I would tell people is that what you have to do is you have to keep working in a good direction with a growth mindset, but be able to expect like things not to go well.
Yeah.
Really, you have to be willing to accept the fact that, we zoom out, we think of it's like this 45-degree angle. And the reality is that when you zoom in, it's this, and then it goes down a little bit, and then it's back up a little bit, and then there's pure stagnation down, and then there's and people, when they're unhappy with work and day-to-day life, and they're like, "Well, I want more. If it doesn't show up and show itself to you right away, you have to just trust the process. Yeah. And the way of trusting the process, in my opinion, is putting yourself out there into positions you otherwise wouldn't, getting uncomfortable in certain areas of growth, and trusting the fact that as long as you are doing things consciously and with the right intention, that eventually life will begin to kind of show you some possibilities. And then it's your choice, ultimately, to take a hold of those opportunities and make something out of it, And, for me, developing a green thumb and having an interest in all of this, if you would have told me that in 2017, 2018, I've been like, that's never going to happen. I have no interest in that. But in the blink of an eye, it became something that now it's like all of my decisions with where I want to live and what kind of a place I want to get are based off around this awesome thing now, right? Crazy. So I think I really want to encourage people to not get too hard on themselves if they haven't found that purpose yet, or if their job used to be their purpose and now it doesn't give them the intrinsic reward it used to. There's a lot of educators out there where that's the thing that they're dealing with the most right now, is they had a beautiful 10, 15, for me, 5 or 6, for some people, 20, 25 years in the classroom. And then the last 3 years especially, but even 5 years before that has just been more difficult for people. And so, you get into this place of, well, the thing I was planning on doing forever, it's not going to be forever now. And for a lot of people, that can just be a make or break, moment. And if you allow it to break you, it's very difficult to come back from. If you decide, all right, this is a moment for me to get uncomfortable, to learn something new, to try something new, then you can turn an uncomfortable situation, again, not overnight, not in a week, maybe it takes a year. But at some point, I really believe that when people are doing things well and with the right intention, that life will show a little mystery. It'll show a little spark. And it's up to the person to recognize that as an opportunity to change their circumstances.
And I think the pandemic accelerated that tremendously, because we have the Great Resignation. People have been leaving their jobs, looking for new careers. Even myself and Anthony, all of us, big changes have happened in our lives, and I believe, and everybody. And it's crazy that during moments of turbulence, of doubt, of fear, insecurity, whatever you're going on in life, that those are the moments where you see the most massive growth. That's camouflaged in pain, heartache, grief. Yep. And when you come out of it and you realize, you look back, you're like, I'm a different person. And it's not easy for most people to do that. And the importance of having a coach. Did you ever have a coach to help you and guide you when you were going through your journey? Or how did you help yourself and develop your mindset that you have?
Yeah, so for me, coaching is only, me hiring my coach is only a year-old thing. Shout out, Angie. And yeah, and earlier on, I would say there was a very important book that put me on that mindset where I decided, again, making a personal choice, I began to trust that I could control my mind to a degree where the mean thoughts or the things that were putting myself down, that I could have a control over that, right? And that book was The 4 Agreements. So I read The 4 Agreements maybe when I was like 22, and I began to entertain the idea that my circumstances of the things that make me upset or that affect me, trigger whatever it might be, that I have a level of control over that. I've been living my life in autopilot, but I can step in and take control of the wheel. So that book had a huge influence on me. I think also it depends on, the environment you grow up in as a kid. I'm a musician, so I was a chubby, overweight musician kid. And I think that each person has their version of that growing up. And I think that those things also kind of shape you a certain way. And I know that for myself early on, it's not so fun to be in marching band your first year in public high school, and it's a Friday night football game, and you're playing the Mickey Mouse theme song to a stand full of your new friends that you're trying to make. You know what I'm saying? Like, it can just be tough. And so I think like you get molded early on, and I think that for some people more than others, you gotta pick up the slack of feeling bad for yourself or feeling unhappy with your circumstances or whatever it might be. So I would say like some of that early instances maybe from like high school, but really reading that book, The 4 Agreements, when I was like 22 or 23, it just made me believe that I had power over the circumstances of what I was thinking.
Powerful.
Yeah. And once that happened, it was like, okay, well, what else is kind of behind the veil that I don't know about or that I haven't been made aware of, or a frame of mind or a perspective of thinking that could really alter my development. And so then, you read a couple more books. I know for me, there's a famous writer, author, researcher named Manly P. Hall. And he was born, I think, in like 1901, but he lived until like the 1990s or late 1980s. Just a brilliant mind. And I happened to randomly find old lectures of his that someone had converted from like cassette tape onto YouTube. I'm talking about like thousands of videos. Like, he's passed on now, but he was hugely popular within this certain niche of work. And so then I'm learning about maybe some spiritual aspects of different cultures or hearing ideas from different places. And I think like that eventually can begin to shape you into, again, this area of thinking where you begin to trust yourself more and more and more. And I think to answer your question, that's what it was for me, was that I began to trust myself more and more and more. Zooming out of the microcosm when all I can see is this immediate failure or this immediate disappointment, whatever it might be, like learning to zoom out of that and go, okay, you could choose to focus on that, or you can zoom out and see that bit of growth from back here, those opportunities that got you here. I tell my students about, I share with them some things about the book. They know about the book. Not because actually I originally told them. This is the era of Google. They'll Google your name and find you. So they found my book on Amazon last year.
Like, teacher.
Yeah, quite literally. And, I tell them, like, at the beginning of the school year, I sent over 100 emails out to different principals and activity directors, coordinators, and stuff like that for trying to create opportunities with speaking and selling my book. If they have a leadership class, something like that. I told them, like, that's 100 blind emails and well over 100 different phone calls to find the email of the person that I needed to get with. I said 5 of those people of 100 responded, okay? For 2 months, maybe like this last October, November, I chose to exist in a place of self-pity and boo-hoo and victimhood because I was thinking about, why didn't 95 people contact me back? Was my email too lengthy? Was it the book? Was it me? Instead of all that energy, instead of being like, wow, 5 people responded to me, and what kind of opportunities can I build from these 5 people who decided that they want to invest in me enough to at least reply? That's an attitude shift. That's a perspective shift, And so that's what I really mean by like zooming out. And I believe ultimately that we're encouraged to play the victim. Our parents when they were our age, our grandparents when they were our age, I don't think that was a thing that anybody did. Victimhood still existed, but they weren't encouraged to play the victim. And everywhere you look, from everything that influences us, victimhood is seen not necessarily like it's glorified, but it's certainly not looked at as a bad thing.
Yep.
And so
scarcity mindset.
Yeah, all of those things play a part. And so for me, I tell the kids, I'm like, we want to vanquish the victimhood, you know, and through proper perspective, you can very quickly turn yourself from the victim to the victor. And in that moment, I just try to show them, like, when I'm sitting there looking at 95 people who don't reply to me, I'm victim. When I choose to look at the 5 people who did respond, I'm the victor. I'm winning. So I think really that trust and buying into the idea that you have control over how you perceive, I think more than anything, that changed.
True. So true,
powerful.
And I'll tell you right now, man, you just brought me back to a moment in my life where if I remember I took full control, and it had to do with that. And I was playing in as much as people could say, you know, as much as things can be unfair, things can be like this, it happens, right? Life is unfair, right? So we sometimes create that victim mentality of like, well, you know, because it's unfair, I'm the singled out one, I'm the this. And I remember when I was at Equinox, you know, there was a time where, you know, I was there for a year, and I remember that business was getting to summertime, and business was just like up and down rocky. And I was thinking about leaving. And I remember I told one of my friends who was a coach, he had been there for like 3 years already. And I remember I was like, dude, I think I'm going to quit all this stuff. He's like, dude, why? And I'm like, because it's not fair. And the membership advisors always give the best leads to the veteran coaches. The managers give the best leads to and that's why there was so much treading and burning. So many new coaches would come in for a few months and leave because they couldn't build their business because they wouldn't get good leads sent their way. And we used to do this thing called the floor shift. And everybody hated the floor shift. Floor shift was like negative. You go on the floor, oh my God, I'm the freaking floor shift, fucking floor shift. Everybody hated the floor shift. Put the blue shirt on, take off the black shirt. You're not training, blue short, floor shift, clean up the weights, go help people spot them, go stretch them, go give them cold towels. And that's the floor shift. So, and you get paid $8 an hour. So? And you're doing the floor for like 3-4 hours. So I remember I would go in there, I'm like, hey, man, I got the freaking floor shift. And I remember that my friend goes, look, man, he goes, let me ask you something. He goes, I know you want to leave. He goes, but look at it in this way. He goes, you can leave here, go somewhere else. Go there for 3 months, a new gym, new environment, new people. You're going to feel great because it's a new stimulus. And the same shit's going to happen again. Favoritism, because it always happens. All these, they're going to play the favorites. You're not going to get the leads because you're the new guy. All the veterans are getting it. And then what? You're going to keep jumping from gym to gym. He's like, have you exhausted everything possible on the floor shift? Have you exhausted every opportunity, every way that you can get leads? Have you exhausted every way? And I said, no, I haven't. He goes, okay, so go back, start writing every possible way creatively that you can come up with when you go on that floor shift. And I was like, And I was like, interesting. And I go, I haven't. And he goes, till you don't exhaust that, he goes, stay. But once you exhaust and you see, then that's when you can make your choice. And I started thinking things differently. I told myself, man, I'm in one of the richest, most successful accumulation of people in one space, because Equinox has a lot of successful individuals, a lot of wealth. And the way I started teaching my mind was, I'm going to go on this floor shift, put on this shirt, and I'm getting paid to meet some of the most wealthiest, successful individuals in Miami that other people don't have access to unless they pay for a top-level seminar, thousands of dollars, or a workshop. And those leaders, well, those people, successful people, they know that at these events, they know people are going to pitch them and want to talk to them, so their guards are up.
Right.
Here, everybody's guards are down. So I changed my way of thinking. I said, these successful people's guards are down. They're at their most vulnerable state. They're wearing regular clothes. They're not on their business profile. And I'm getting paid to talk to these people. Holy shit. And when I switched that, man, and I started attacking the floor and just networking, and I've met so many, my business went like this. And I remember building my whole entire business off the floor shift.
Amazing.
And I was like, it's so crazy that it's just simply taking that one thing that might be always viewed as a negative, because that's what people put on it, but you find the good in it, what it will do for you in the long run. And I just wanted to share that because it
that's great.
You were saying that just reminded me of that story in my own head of of even reminding me now of like even being aware again, telling myself like
how often you can choose.
Yeah.
Like how often you can make a choice.
We forget about that sometimes. We forget about it. You know, even I'm sure we can come up with like.
And again, we're conditioned to forget about it. We're conditioned to go to that headspace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You were gonna say something, Brian?
No. I'm just saying, okay. Yeah, no, we are conditioned to be like that. And it's hard when you facing adversity because a lot of us feel helpless. Like people who lose their jobs, they have one source of income. And then they feel helpless. They can't leave. They feel trapped. They have health insurance. They can't, pursue what they really want to do. And you see a bunch of people who are going through that repetitive hamster wheel. Yeah. And depression. You see people just going down that.
Yeah. And they're
social media.
Yeah. These things, like, again, they can become really, really cumbersome for people. And people, I think, forget sometimes how much control they have over how cumbersome they become. Yeah. I'm not going to pretend like money and those type of decisions with work, like those are really, really difficult. Like I'm probably still teaching because of, money, so to speak. But I know now for a fact that when I'm done with this school year that I'm moving on full time with these other things because I've trusted myself through that process to get it to the point now where I see the positive effects of it and I go, oh, we're here. It's going to be good. Like it's going to be great. And I think, again, like for those people who are stuck, who are feeling stuck, just don't live out of polarities. Don't feel like it's all the worst thing ever and that you have to immediately get to this place where it's the best thing ever. Just start to try to improve upon your condition and stop comparing. I think more than anything, our habit of comparing ourselves to our friends, our family, let alone people we don't even know. How many times do we compare ourselves to people on Instagram who might be doing something that we want to do, but they have more of it, or they do this part of it that we wish we had? That gets us absolutely nowhere.
Yeah, don't compare your chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 20.
Exactly. Yeah, not for even a second. And if again someone can tweak that mindset and that perspective and go, not only am I going to not compare. Not only am I going to be aware enough of myself to not compare, I'm also going to remind myself of everything that I have to be grateful for. And when you do those things in conjunction with each other, again, your day-to-day life becomes a lot smoother.
Can you take us real quick through something, a tool, a practice that you use with somebody in that situation where it's a constant comparing? How do you snap them out of that? How do you get them to create a new habit around not doing that anymore?
Certainly. To me, the most important thing, there's two parts of it. One is I really encourage people to practice their gratitudes. And what I mean by that is it's not enough to just, okay, I'm grateful for this person, but like, writing it down. Yeah. Writing down 3 to 5 things that you're grateful for and not throwing it in the corner of your desk, maybe putting it on your mirror in your bathroom. And when you're getting ready to leave for the day, you look at that and you don't just read it in your mind, you say it out loud. And for a lot of people, really, when you think about it, it's going to eventually be the same things. Family, friends, a certain level of comfort, a roof over your head. You start your day with that, and you say that out loud and you mean it, it has an effect. It has an immediate effect on your brain. And I think the same thing goes for someone who's trying to develop a new habit or get out of a bad habit. Holding yourself accountable by writing things down and repeating them out loud. Again, for some people, like if I was 18 and someone said that to me, I'd be like, that's the goofiest shit I've ever heard in my life. But now I understand the severity of that and the severity of what something like signing a little personal contract can do. Because if you're already in a space where you're trying to improve yourself, some people would just go, well, I'm going to sign it and then I'm going to read it again later and say, well, whatever. Okay, well then this probably ain't the work for you, right? So if someone is already in a space where they're wanting to improve their quality of life and either begin a new good habit or get rid of an old bad habit, hold yourself accountable. Write it down, wake up, read it out loud to yourself, sign it. Like that seems really extreme for some people, but if you don't have a spouse, a significant other, somebody in your immediate sphere to hold you accountable all the time, what else do you have?
I agree.
Like, not everybody's found that yet or is in that position yet. And so you really have to hold yourself accountable. And I think by writing things down and articulating them out loud, whether that's the new habit you want to build or the old habit you're trying to break or something like the gratitudes, I think that by approaching it that way, it exists. It's not just somewhere up in your mind, getting cluttered with all the other responsibilities, due dates, and everything else. You say it out loud, you articulate it, and when you hear it, you believe it, you trust it.
Amen to that. I gotta tell you right now, man, writing things down, and then number one, being truly intentional. I think a lot of times we do things just to check it off, and we're not really intentional. And that's when you see things not actually move forward. So when you're intentional, you truly believe in meaning and are honest with yourself, and you're coming out of a true place, and then you're putting it on paper, and you're reading it and telling yourself that, that's where the magic happens. Man, John, dude, this has been fun, man.
Oh, I could talk with you guys forever.
We're going to have to do a whole nother segment, a part 2, because, dude, I personally, for me, I've had a great time. I've learned so much.
Yeah, we're going to take John out to dinner.
That's it. No, that's it.
I'm not
that's
even
it.
I'd love to. I would love to.
We definitely got to do it, man. We definitely, and I'll tell you right now, man, I'm going to be running home and figuring out how I can start that little garden. So
yeah.
I'm telling you that. And on top of that, man, it's just the way that your vibrancy and the way that you just put things out. It's so easy to, first of all, be gravitated towards it, and receive it in such a simple way to understand. And I appreciate you sharing that, man.
Thank you.
The floor is yours. Where can people find you?
So the best way to find me is on my Instagram at jbroswellness, B as in boy, R-O-S, like a bro, plural. So jbroswellness is the best place to find me. And my email is also johnbroswellness@yahoo.com. But certainly Instagram probably the best way to find me. And, for any of your listeners who enjoyed this segment, it's kind of a gift to you. If this resonated with you in any kind of way, feel free to message me and contact me. Give you a free consultation for being a part of the Sweat It Out podcast crew and whatever else. Because again, this work it's important and it's necessary. And it's not a lifetime necessary type of thing. I think that's something where some people get intimidated by the idea of it. It's learn a few things that you've never even heard of before outside of a classroom that you never had, and then persist on for the rest of your time, So yeah, please give me a shout at jbros wellness, and I throw a mixture of things from the EQ, emotional intelligence world, in addition to the fruit trees and random opinions in between.
And where can people get the book?
The book is available on Amazon. It is again called The Personal Wellness Principles: Simple Steps to Create a Happy, Healthy, and Fulfilling Life. And that is available online on Amazon.
We got the ultimate wellness bro over here.
That's it.
Woo, man.
That's the hope.
John, the way we wrap it up
brother.
here on the podcast is we like to take our guests, through a quick little burn around. It's literally question and answer.
Perfect.
Boom. Back to back. You ready?
Right. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Question number 1. Are you going to bring down some of your skill sets and services and start planting them here in Miami?
I already have. Yes. I had a job site in Kendall back in January.
Okay.
And from that job site, there are 2 new interests, and I just haven't had the chance to get down here for the consultations yet because I teach all day. But when we have spring break here in March, I'm going to be back down here for those consultations. So absolutely.
Love it.
Yeah.
What is your biggest passion that you have outside of what you're doing right now?
Biggest passion outside of, music, 100% music. Yeah, so I grew up playing the saxophone. That was my talent, like my thing. Just didn't have to ever really work at it at all. I was all state and went to Interlochen Music School in Michigan and all sorts of stuff with that. Wow. And that eventually from the saxophone branched into when I was 19 in college. Eddie Vedder, the lead singer of Pearl Jam, he put out a ukulele album, solo album, and I was just like obsessed with it. And so I taught myself how to play the uke. And for the past few years, especially before COVID, I was playing locally at all sorts of bars and restaurants around my town as supplemental income to come along with the teaching. And I have a huge passion for that. So awesome. I actually have an electric uke, a couple of them, but one of them is a steel string, like a regular electric guitar, and I can tap the Eruption Eddie Van Halen end part on it.
That's
on a ukulele.
On
a ukulele, yeah.
That's going to be the next prop that comes in.
I'm so down. I'm about it. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so music for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Next question. What is the one thing, if you could pick just one thing, that you would like to see start changing in today's world, what would that be?
I would like that to be for people to tap into their individuality. I think more than anything else, the idea of a hive mind freaks me out more than anything, because it used to be that to be the individual who was exercising critical thought was seen as something that was wondrous, that was industrious and responsible, and now it's been conditioned so that if you're a critical thinker, it's almost like you're seen as some monster, or someone who's incapable of blending in with society and however they want to paint that picture. But I would really say that again, and it goes into people wandering around, wondering why they feel so anxious or they feel so depressed and life is so meaningless. Well, how much of yourself are you showing? Yeah. How honest is your portrayal of who you are to the people around you who see you? Or are you playing a character? Are you playing a character that, you know, whether it's Netflix in our phones or TikTok, whatever it might be, that there's so many people walking around playing a character. And I think that quicker that people tap into the fact that they are unique and that they deserve to be unique and not be a part of a hive mind. Everybody's going to agree on, there's too many things in this world to talk about where people are going to agree. You're going to fall under all sorts of different branches of people believing this also. But overall, people need to be their own person and responsibly decide for themselves who it is that they are and what it is that they believe.
Next question. What is the biggest obstacle you ever faced and how did you overcome it?
Biggest obstacle. I would say the one that I got out of this last year. Just the idea that for a long time when I was younger, I loved history. And so it was like, all right, you be a history teacher. And there's a part of me that I was always like, but there's something else. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to articulate it. But I don't think I want to do this forever. And that doesn't take away from the amazing intrinsic reward I get from my students. But then developing that into a place where I felt like I could leave that and fully take on that role, that's the most difficult thing I've ever dealt with in my life, probably. So I would say gaining that confidence to recognize that you don't necessarily have to do the thing that you thought you would do forever. That was the biggest hurdle I've ever gotten over. And very, very thankful and glad to be over it.
Thank you for that honesty, man.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Last and final question. What's the biggest piece of advice you can leave off to all our listeners today in one single sentence?
Feed your primary foods. And so for those who might not know what that is, we're not talking about necessarily actual food calories. We're talking about things like your exercise, your relationships, the food that you put in your body, a certain level of spirituality that you might have and practice. I think the primary foods are the easiest and quickest thing that somebody can go and look at and be like, okay, I already am aware of all of these, but I haven't seen it in this way. And so I think by becoming aware of the primary foods and also by becoming aware of cognitive distortions, I don't think there's anything else on the planet that can get somebody to very, very quickly begin improving their circumstances and the way that they feel.
Boom. Wow.
I love that.
Wow. Man, John, once again, brother, we appreciate you, your time, your value, your knowledge,
Thank you.
Your experiences, and sharing that to our audience and to the world. Brother, what you're doing is major impact, and dude, you've personally impacted us here today, and
I appreciate that.
Listeners.
I appreciate you guys for the opportunity. It's, you know, these type of conversations are impossible without a proper back and forth. So I'm equally grateful to you guys. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
So guys, if you got value out of this podcast today, we'd appreciate it if you like, comment, subscribe, share, drop a rating, leave a review, because the more love you show us, the more love we can show back. And remember, apply at least one thing that you learned today. Not tomorrow, not the next day, but right now. Till next time on The Sweat It Out.